I spent 25 years doing the grueling, unpaid administrative heavy lifting to build my husband's pretentious eco-architecture firm, only for him to try and kick me out of our custom-built house, so his 28-year-old wellness consultant could use my kitchen for her matcha videos. Look, I just need to get this out before my brain actually implodes from keeping it all bottled up. Pour yourself a drink, or maybe two, because this is going to take a while. Honestly, if one more person tells me that the universe has a plan, I might scream. I am a 52-year-old woman who spent the absolute best years of my life building a throne for a man who eventually decided I was just taking up too much room on the floor. I mean, I should have seen the signs. I really should have. But when you are in the trenches with someone, you just put your head down and work. My husband, well, soon-to-be ex-husband, is Marcus. If you read any of those high-end Architectural Digest magazines, you have probably seen his face. He is the self-proclaimed visionary behind Canopy Designs, a firm that builds these hyper-expensive, sustainable glass ecodomes for tech billionaires who want to pretend they are one with nature while having underfloor heating. We met 25 years ago in Portland. Back then, he was not a visionary. He was just a guy with a sketchbook, a lot of big ideas, and absolutely zero practical sense. We started Canopy out of a freezing, uninsulated garage that constantly smelled like wet dog and fertilizer. For over 2 decades, I bled for that company. I mean that literally. While Marcus was out hiking in the Cascades looking for quote-unquote organic inspiration, I was the one working double shifts at a dental clinic just to pay for his first prototype materials. When he finally got a client, I was the one pulling the permits. I was the one arguing with the city zoning board at 8 o'clock in the morning. I handled every single piece of paperwork for the Internal Revenue Service. I managed the supply chains, dealing with custom glass fabricators in Germany who refused to speak English. I kept the lights on. I never asked for the spotlight. I genuinely did not care about the interviews or the shiny awards they handed out at those pretentious galas. Marcus was the face of the brand. He gave the TED Talks. I was just the tired, messy woman in the back room surrounded by soil testing kits and unpaid invoices. He started telling his friends I was the chief operating officer, but it was just a joke to him. I was unpaid labor. I did not even draw a salary for the first 10 years. Everything we made went right back into the business, or into the massive, ridiculous timber and glass compound we built out in the gorge. I built that house. Well, I managed the contractors, fought with the county over the water rights, and made sure the heavy-duty retaining walls did not slide off the cliff, while Marcus picked out vintage Japanese pruning shears and imported moss. Over the last 4 years, things shifted. It was not sudden, it was like a slow leak in a tire. Canopy Designs exploded. Suddenly, we had a human resources department and an operations team, which effectively boxed me out of the company I built from the ground up. I was told by Marcus to just relax and enjoy our success, to take up pottery or something, but honestly, it felt more like I was being quietly managed out of my own life. He looked at me the way you look at an old, reliable piece of farm equipment. Good to have around, but you would not exactly put it on the cover of a brochure. Then came Chloe. She was 28 years old, wore a lot of beige linen, and was hired to be our new director of holistic integration. Whatever that even means. Chloe used the word mindfulness entirely too much. She also started spending an excessive amount of time with Marcus behind closed doors in the design studio. I am not an idiot. I could see the way he looked at her. It was the exact same way he used to look at a pristine plot of land. Like something empty that he just had to build his ego on top of. Whenever I walked into the studio to drop off mail or bring them lunch, their conversation would just die. Chloe would give me this tight, sympathetic little smile, like she pitied me. Like I was the nagging mother, who was ruining their creative flow. I brought it up a few times, asking Marcus if there was something going on, but he would just completely gaslight me. He would say things like, "Nora, you are being paranoid. You have been so ungrounded lately. Maybe you need to go to a meditation retreat." The absolute climax of his arrogance happened on a Tuesday. It was pouring rain, and I had just gotten home from the hardware store. My boots were covered in mud, and my arms were full of organic compost bags for the winter garden. I walked into our beautiful, open-concept living space, the one I had literally given up sleeping for 2 years to get built, and found Marcus sitting at the custom dining table. Chloe was standing right behind him, with her hand resting on his shoulder. It was a very deliberate, very territorial placement. And laid out on the table were 3 incredibly thick stacks of legal paper. Beside the table, sitting on the reclaimed oak floor, were 6 cardboard moving boxes. I dropped the compost bags. They hit the floor with a heavy, wet thud, spilling dark soil all over the entryway. I did not even try to clean it up. I mean, why would I? Marcus did not even flinch at the mess. He just tapped the top of the center stack of legal paper with his fancy fountain pen. "Nora, we need to talk," he said. He used that exact voice. You know the one. The voice he used when a contractor quoted him a price he thought was insulting. It was calm, flat, and entirely devoid of human warmth. I did not move. I just stood there, staring at the boxes and then up at Chloe, who was looking at me with that same nauseating, pitying smile. They had timed this. They had waited until I was out running errands for the very house they were sitting in, and they had bought boxes. They were operating on the absolute certainty that I was totally powerless to stop whatever they had planned. "Sit down, Nora," Marcus repeated, pushing the center stack of papers closer to the edge of the table. "We are trying to handle this with compassion." Compassion? I mean, honestly, the absolute nerve of this man. I kicked off my muddy boots and walked over to the table in my socks, leaving a trail of wet dirt across the floor. "What exactly is this, Marcus?" I asked, looking down at the documents. "It is a comprehensive transition plan," Chloe chimed in, her voice all breathy and soft, like she was guiding an expensive yoga class. "Marcus and I have realized that our spiritual and professional paths are completely intertwined. And unfortunately, your energy has become very stagnant. It is blocking the firm's growth." I just stared at her. Stagnant energy. I was the one making sure the payroll went through every 2 weeks, so she could buy her $9 iced matcha lattes on the company card. Marcus cleared his throat, taking charge of the conversation again like a chief executive officer addressing a minor, slightly annoying shareholder. "I have had the legal team draft a separation agreement," he said, tapping the crisp white pages. "It covers the dissolution of our marriage and your formal exit from Canopy Designs. I am offering you a flat buyout of $80,000 for your nominal shares. It is more than fair, considering you have not actively contributed to the creative design process in years." $80,000. The firm cleared over $6 million last year alone. And he was offering me the equivalent of a mid-sized luxury sedan to walk away from 2 decades of grueling labor. "And the boxes?" I asked, pointing a trembling finger at the cardboard stack sitting in the middle of my living room. "Right," Marcus said, looking slightly uncomfortable for the absolute first time. "Well, since the compound was built using corporate funds, it is technically registered as an asset of the limited liability company. Since you are no longer an employee or a partner, you cannot live here. For liability reasons. We have arranged for a packing crew to come tomorrow morning, but Chloe thought it would be softer if you packed your personal essentials yourself today. We booked you a suite at a boutique hotel downtown for 30 days so you can figure things out." "You are kicking me out of my own house," I said. My voice did not even sound like my own. It sounded hollow, like it was echoing from the bottom of a well. "Today. It is not your house, Nora," Marcus sighed, rubbing the bridge of his nose like I was giving him a severe migraine. "It belongs to the firm. I am trying to give you a soft landing here. Please do not make this ugly. Just take the buyout. If you fight this, my lawyers will tie you up in court for 5 years, and you will walk away with absolutely nothing." He was so incredibly smug. He had calculated every single move. He thought I was just a tired, middle-aged administrative assistant who would cry, sign the papers, and disappear into a cheap apartment. He thought he held all the cards, because he controlled the corporate bank accounts and the public relations narrative. But here is the thing about Marcus. For all his visionary genius, he has a remarkably terrible memory for administrative details. He called paperwork toxic, left-brain energy. He hated reading contracts, hated dealing with the county clerks, and left every single legal and financial maneuver to me for 25 straight years. And as I stood there, looking at his condescending face and Chloe's fake sympathy, all I could think about was the thick, cream-colored envelope sitting at the bottom of my canvas tote bag. 2 weeks ago, I got a phone call from an estate attorney in Boston. My great-aunt Eleanor had passed away. Now, Eleanor was the black sheep of my mother's family. She never married, moved to the East Coast in the 1970s, and apparently invested heavily in commercial real estate. We had not spoken in 15 years, but according to the lawyer, she had been quietly keeping tabs on me. She knew about the business. She knew I was the one doing the actual, unglamorous work to keep Marcus afloat. And she left me everything. I am not talking about a nice little nest egg. I am talking about $28 million in liquid assets and a massive commercial high-rise in downtown Boston. The attorney had sent the finalized transfer documents that morning. I was a multimillionaire, standing in muddy socks, being offered $80,000 to quietly erase myself from my own life. But that was not even the best part. No, the best part was a specific piece of paperwork from 12 years ago. You see, back when Canopy Designs was just starting to get bigger projects, Marcus completely botched a structural calculation on a custom build in Seattle. The client sued us for gross negligence. We were facing a total financial wipeout. Marcus was terrified they would pierce the corporate veil and take the house. So, on the advice of a very expensive crisis lawyer, Marcus signed a quitclaim deed. He transferred 100% ownership of the Gorge compound completely into my name as a sole and separate asset, insulating it from the firm's legal liabilities. We survived the lawsuit, settled out of court, and the business kept growing. And Marcus, being Marcus, completely forgot about the deed. He just assumed that because the firm paid the property taxes out of the expense account, the firm owned the house. But the county recorder's office said otherwise. Legally, the limited liability company did not own a single wooden beam of this house. I did. I looked at Marcus. I looked at the severance papers. And then, for the first time since I walked through the door, I smiled. What is so funny? Chloe asked, her brow furrowing, temporarily ruining her perfectly smooth, Botoxed forehead. Honestly, I said, dropping my canvas bag onto the floor next to the spilled compost. I am just marveling at your utter lack of attention to detail, Marcus. I mean, it was almost sad how fast his whole visionary persona just crumbled. I reached into my canvas tote bag, pushing past the organic compost receipts, and pulled out a heavily stapled packet of paper. I had printed it at the county library that very morning. I tossed the packet right onto the center of his pristine, custom oak dining table, letting it slide until it bumped against his ridiculous separation agreement. Do you remember the Seattle project from 12 years ago? I asked him, leaning against the kitchen island. The one where you completely ignored the soil density reports, and the entire retaining wall collapsed during a freak rainstorm. Marcus glared at me, his jaw clenching. I do not see how ancient history is remotely relevant to the fact that you need to leave the premises, Nora. It is highly relevant, I told him, picking a stray piece of potting soil off the granite countertop and flicking it into the sink. Because when the client sued Canopy Designs for $2 million, you had a complete and total meltdown. You were terrified they were going to pierce the corporate veil and take this house. So, on the advice of your crisis lawyer, you signed a quitclaim deed. Chloe looked back and forth between us, her perfectly shaped eyebrows pulling together in confusion. Marcus, what is a quitclaim deed? Marcus did not answer her. He was staring at the stapled packet. The color was actively draining out of his face, leaving him looking like a very pale, very expensive ghost. He slowly reached out and picked up the first page. You transferred the property, I continued, crossing my arms over my chest. You transferred it entirely to me as my sole and separate asset, just to hide it from the creditors during the lawsuit. That was temporary, Marcus stammered, his voice suddenly losing all that flat, corporate confidence. My lawyers were supposed to transfer it back to the limited liability company after we settled out of court. They tried, I said, offering a tight, extremely exhausted smile. They sent you the transfer paperwork 4 separate times. I put those envelopes directly on your desk. But you told me that reading legal documents was toxic, uncreative energy. You actually threw the third notice directly into the recycling bin, because you were too busy conceptualizing a meditation pavilion for some guy in Aspen. I watched him swallow hard. I went to the county recorder yesterday, Marcus. I own this property. 100%. The firm does not have a single legal claim to it. You are sitting at my dining table, in my house, trying to evict me with moving boxes that you bought with company money. Machiavelli wrote in that book of his that men who become rulers through the fortune of others have a very hard time maintaining their position, because they do not actually know how to hold on to power. They just rely on the goodwill of whoever put them on the throne to begin with. Marcus built his entire identity on my unpaid labor and my meticulous record keeping. And he was so incredibly arrogant that he completely forgot I was the one holding the keys to the castle. Chloe was blinking very fast now, her beige linen outfit suddenly looking a lot less relaxed. "Wait," she said, her voice pitching up an octave. "Are you saying we have to leave?" "I am saying," I said, walking over and kicking one of the folded moving boxes toward her with my muddy sock, "that I really need the space. I am hosting a private gardening weekend, and your stagnant energy is really blocking my flow. So, you might want to start packing your personal essentials." Marcus stood up so fast that his heavy wooden chair scraped loudly against the floorboards. He was furious now. The fake, holistic compassion was completely gone, replaced by pure, unadulterated panic. "You cannot do this, Nora. I will sue you. I will drag you through civil court for a decade if I have to. I will bankrupt you." Honestly, I almost laughed in his face. "With what money, Marcus?" I asked. "Canopy Designs is completely over-leveraged. You took out a massive commercial line of credit to fund the new studio expansion in Oregon." "I know, because I am the one who processed the loan applications. Without my signature as a guarantor on the tax filings next quarter, the bank is going to freeze your accounts." I took a step closer to him. He actually leaned back, away from me. "And speaking of the business," I said, my voice dropping to a near whisper, "I am resigning as your chief operating officer. Effective immediately. I am not answering emails, I am not calling the German glass suppliers to beg for extensions, and I am certainly not fixing the creative accounting you have been doing to hide your little luxury hotel weekends with Chloe." Chloe gasped softly, taking a step away from Marcus. I guess she thought they were being discreet. They were not. "I am withdrawing my name from all corporate bank accounts," I told him, laying out the reality of his situation like a buffet. "I am removing myself as the primary contact for the Internal Revenue Service. You are on your own, Marcus. Let us see how much of a visionary you are when you actually have to pay your own utility bills." He looked at me like he was seeing a complete stranger. And I guess, in a way, he was. He was looking at a woman who no longer cared if he sank or swam. I walked over to the front door and opened it wide, letting the cold, rainy Portland air sweep into the overheated room. "You have until 6 o'clock this evening to get your things out of my house," I said, pointing out into the driveway. "If you are not gone by then, I am calling the county sheriff to report 2 trespassers." I mean, you should have seen the absolute scramble that happened next. It was pathetic. They did not even make it to 6 o'clock. By 5:30, Marcus and his little holistic muse were frantically shoving expensive linen shirts and vintage Japanese pruning tools into the back of his imported electric sport utility vehicle. Chloe was actually crying over a ceramic matcha bowl she accidentally chipped in her rush. I just leaned against the doorframe, drinking a cup of chamomile tea, watching them pack. I did not lift a single finger to help. When the taillights of his car finally disappeared down the long, winding driveway, I locked the heavy deadbolt. The silence in the house was absolute. For the first time in 25 years, I was not anticipating someone else's crisis. I walked into the kitchen, threw the spilled compost into the trash bin, and poured myself a very large glass of red wine. The next morning, I did exactly what I told him I would do. I opened my laptop, drafted a 1-sentence email to the corporate certified public accountant, formally resigning as Chief Operating Officer of Canopy Designs, and officially withdrawing my signature as guarantor from all limited liability company accounts. Then, I closed the laptop, turned off my cell phone, and went outside to tend to my winter garden. Marcus honestly thought I was bluffing. He genuinely believed that after a few days, I would cave, pick up the phone, and fix his mess like I always did. Over the next 3 weeks, he sent dozens of frantic emails. The German glass suppliers started calling my old business number, demanding payment. The Human Resources Department reached out in a total panic because the bi-monthly payroll had bounced. I ignored all of it. I was too busy flying back and forth to Boston, meeting with the state attorneys to quietly transition my Aunt Eleanor's $28 million portfolio into my name. When the divorce proceedings officially started a month later, Marcus made the absolute worst tactical error of his entire life. He hired a ridiculously aggressive, extremely expensive litigation attorney to try and forcefully claw back the Gorge house. He claimed the quitclaim deed was signed under duress. But here is the beautiful thing about hostile asset division. When one party accuses the other of financial manipulation, the family court automatically mandates a standard, deep-dive forensic financial audit of the shared business. For 2.5 decades, I had been the human dam holding back the massive flood of Marcus's financial incompetence and arrogance. I smoothed over the late payments, I balanced the ledgers, and I legally creatively shifted funds to keep the firm in the black. When I removed myself, the dam broke. When the court-appointed forensic accountants started digging into Canopy Designs, they did not just find incompetence. They found massive, gaping sinkholes of outright fraud. It turns out, Marcus was not just expensing his luxury wellness retreats with Chloe on the corporate card. The auditors discovered that for the last 4 years, Marcus had been charging his billionaire clients premium rates for top-tier, imported sustainable construction materials, but quietly substituting cheap, non-compliant domestic timber and pocketing the massive difference. He was stiffing independent local contractors for months on end, claiming cash flow issues, while simultaneously transferring large sums of money into a hidden offshore account under Chloe's name. I did not plant any evidence. I did not make a single anonymous phone call to the Architectural Ethics Board. I did not leak anything to the press. I literally just sat on my reclaimed oak porch, drank my coffee, and let the natural consequences of his own actions finally catch up to him. By allowing the standard legal audits to proceed completely unimpeded, without me there to intercept the inquiries or explain away the missing funds, the entire firm imploded. The bank that held the massive commercial line of credit for the new studio expansion panicked when they saw the preliminary audit report. They immediately called in the loan. Marcus, of course, did not have the liquid cash to pay it back. Construction on the new studio halted overnight. 3 of his biggest clients, the tech billionaires who funded his entire operation, caught wind of the material substitution fraud and slapped Canopy Designs with massive breach of contract lawsuits. It was a bloodbath. Machiavelli said that a ruler who relies entirely on mercenaries will never be stable or secure, because mercenaries have absolutely no loyalty. Marcus treated every single person in his life like a mercenary, including me. And the very moment the money stopped flowing and the prestige dried up, everyone completely abandoned him. The board of investors dissolved the company to strip it for parts. The sleek, holistic public relations image he had spent 20 years cultivating was shredded in the local business journals. And the absolute icing on the cake, when the Internal Revenue Service got involved to investigate the offshore transfers, Chloe did not stick around to practice her stagnant energy mindfulness. She packed her beige linen outfits, broke off her engagement with Marcus, and moved to Bali with a yoga instructor she met on social media, leaving him to face the federal tax penalties completely alone. The divorce was finalized in late October. Honestly, the settlement was incredibly straightforward because, by the time the ink was dry, Marcus had absolutely nothing left to negotiate with. The $80,000 buyout he originally tried to slap in my face. It did not even exist anymore. The corporate accounts were frozen, the investors had seized his remaining assets, and he was drowning in civil litigation. I kept the Gorge house, completely free and clear, and I legally severed every single tie to the burning wreckage of Canopy Designs. I remember the day it all officially ended. I was standing in my kitchen, making a piece of toast, when the intercom at the front gate buzzed. It was raining again, a classic miserable Pacific Northwest afternoon. I looked at the security monitor. It was Marcus. He was standing out in the rain, looking absolutely drenched. His expensive electric car was gone, replaced by a rusted-out old sedan parked on the shoulder of the road. I pushed the talk button on the panel. "What do you want, Marcus?" I asked. My voice was completely steady. "Nora, please," he said, his voice crackling through the cheap speaker. He sounded awful. The arrogant tech visionary confidence was completely stripped away. "I just want to talk. I have nothing left. Chloe is gone. The firm is gone. I am living in a studio apartment in Beaverton. I just need some help. I miss your grounded energy. I mean, can you actually believe the sheer audacity of this man? He spent 2 decades treating me like an obsolete piece of office furniture, tried to evict me from my own home, and the second his life fell apart, he came crawling right back to the foundation he tried to destroy, asking for a handout. "You do not miss my energy, Marcus," I told him, staring at his pathetic, soaked face on the little black and white screen. "You miss my unpaid labor. You miss the safety net. But the net is gone. Nora, I am begging you," he pleaded, wiping rain out of his eyes. "Just let me come inside for 10 minutes. We can figure this out. We were a team for 25 years. Machiavelli wrote that a wise ruler ought never to keep faith, when by doing so it would be against his interests. Marcus broke faith with me the moment he thought he did not need me anymore. And I was not about to make the mistake of trusting a drowning man who would just pull me under with him. "You should have held on to what you had when you had it, Marcus," I said. "Do not come back here again." I took my finger off the button, turned off the intercom system entirely, and went back to eating my toast. I did not feel angry. I did not feel triumphant, either. I just felt this profound, overwhelming sense of relief. You see, the hardest boundary you can ever set with a parasite is just closing the door and letting them starve on their own. I finally understood that I did not need to ruin him. Removing my protection was the most devastating thing I could have ever done to him. So here I am, 52 years old, completely emancipated, and sitting on a Boston real estate fortune that I never saw coming. It took a while to decompress, honestly. For the first few months, I just slept. I worked in the garden. I sat on my reclaimed oak porch and stared out at the river. I had to completely unlearn 25 years of constantly anticipating some man's crisis. I had to learn how to just exist in a quiet house. But eventually, I got bored. So I flew back to Massachusetts and started looking at Aunt Eleanor's portfolio. Instead of just hoarding the $28 million like a dragon sitting on a pile of gold, I decided to do something useful with it. I hired a team of incredibly competent lawyers and started a philanthropic foundation. We take the rental income from the commercial high-rise in downtown Boston and funnel it directly into grants for women trying to open their own independent contracting and trade businesses. We fund women studying to be electricians, plumbers, and structural engineers. The women who do the actual, unglamorous, dirty work that keeps the world running. The ones who are usually standing in the background, keeping the lights on, while some guy in a linen shirt takes all the credit for the aesthetic vision. I remember picking up the phone when the estate attorney called me last week to finalize the paperwork. "Nora, the first round of grants is ready to be dispersed," he said. I just smiled into the receiver. "Good," I told him. "Let us get these women paid what they are actually worth." I do not put my name on the foundation. I do not do press releases, and I certainly do not host pretentious charity galas. I just review the applications, sign the checks, and enjoy the absolute quiet of my life. Sometimes, I walk out onto the back deck of my house and look at the ridiculous glass and timber architecture that I practically killed myself to build. I used to look at this compound and feel this heavy, suffocating weight, like it was a prison I had constructed for myself. But now it just feels like a monument to my own survival. I outlasted him. I outplayed him without even trying. And the best part is, he knows it. He has to wake up every single day in his tiny apartment, knowing that the woman he tried to throw away is the only reason he was ever anything at all. Anyway, I think my wine glass is empty. Thanks for sitting here and listening to me rant. It feels really good to finally say it all out loud.